After working with over 100 ecom brands and driving over $105 million in attributed email and SMS revenue, I can tell you that the biggest shift happening in e-commerce right now has nothing to do with your ads, nothing to do with your creative, and nothing to do with your product. In fact, it's actually the cost of acquiring a customer. And that's because the average e-com customer acquisition cost has hit $223 in 2026, which is up over 222% in the last decade alone. And if your entire growth marketing strategy revolves and is built around paid acquisition, then you are sitting quite literally on a ticking time bomb. And so the brands that are winning right now aren't the brands that are spending the most on ads. It's actually the ones making the most amount of revenue off of every customer that they paid to acquire on the top end in the first place. And that's what this video is about. I'm going to break down exactly why acquisition costs are exploding and ballooning, and the 4-layer retention system that every brand has to have today. The smartest ecom brands are building this out so that you can grow without actually burning cash on ads and worrying about blowing up the top of funnel acquisition when you're trying to scale that side of the business, right? So let's go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what we're talking about. So before we get into the solution, we need to understand why acquisition costs got so expensive in the first place. There are 3 major shifts that have happened in the last couple of years. First is iOS 14 privacy update. When Apple gave users essentially the option to opt out of tracking, over 80% of users actually did. And so that gutted Facebook's targeting ability so that they can basically target specific segments overnight. And so your ads essentially went from being laser targeted to basically guessing. Okay. The second is that Meta CPMs have increasingly been surging over the last couple of years. Since about 2020, it's gone about 90%. And so you're essentially paying double for the same eyeballs that you had in 2020. You're paying double the amount to actually get those same amount of CPMs. And so those eyeballs are less targeted than they used to be. So you're essentially paying for worse results, which is pretty crazy. Now, the third thing is actually market saturation. There are more direct-to-consumer brands today competing for the same customers than ever before. And so more brands means more ad spend chasing the same pool of buyers, which at the end of the day drives up costs for everybody, right? Now, why does retention win every time versus acquisition? Here is the real math. And this is where it gets really interesting, because when you look at the actual math, the case for retention is overwhelming, right? And that's because it costs 5 times to 7 times more to acquire a new customer than it is to actually keep an existing customer. And the probability of selling to an existing customer is 60 to 70% higher than it is to sell to a new prospect, right? So the third thing is that repeat customers basically spend an average of 67% more on subsequent orders than they do than first-time buyers. So let me put this in real term. If you're spending $223 to acquire a customer who buys once and never comes back again, then you're basically lighting money on fire, if you think about it. But if that same customer comes back and buys 3 or 4 or more times, now that $223 acquisition that you had on the front end is now spread across multiple purchases. And so your customer lifetime value goes up and your effective CAC, customer acquisition cost, drops dramatically. Okay. So what you need to do, and what I genuinely jump on every single week with brands that are doing $1 million to $10 million a month, is essentially retrain and rephrase and emphasize the important that when you stop renting attention through top of funnel acquisition strategies, paid ads, you have to step into the role of start owning these relationships. Okay. And don't get me wrong, this isn't a retention marketing versus paid ads battle here. We need both. That they're just necessary evils, right? All e-com brands require both of these to function, build enterprise value, and actually have exit potential down the line. So here's how I think of it. When you run paid ads, you're basically renting attention. And the moment that you shut those ads off, guess what happens? The traffic stops. And then guess what happens? Conversions drop. And so you don't end up owning any of that actual traffic. But when you build an email and SMS list, you now own that audience. Those lists belong to you. They don't belong to Zuckerberg. They don't belong to Amazon. They don't belong to any other corporate overlord over there that is basically taking your ad dollars and giving you attention from these customers. So you can reach people at any time from anywhere with your email list. And that, my friends, is called an owned audience. So you don't have to pay for a platform besides a marginal fee that you pay Klaviyo for access to the platform and for being able to essentially have these emails in your list, right? So your email list at the end of the day is like owning a house. Like every subscriber that you add is equity that compounds over time when you have a mortgage, right? And the brands that understand this are the ones that are growing and building real sustainable businesses that have exit potential and enterprise value, because no one is going to buy a brand that has to consistently spend every single month just to survive. People are buying investor groups and VC funds are buying brands that have longevity and they have retention built into it, because that's where the profitability comes from long term. Wall Street doesn't think in days and weeks and a year. They think long term, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years and longevity. So that is one of the biggest principles that I feel ecom brand owners really need to understand today, so that we actually build brands that are sustainable and worth having, essentially. Okay. Now, let's talk about the retention revenue engine. This is super important. What does a real retention strategy actually look like? I think there's a very big misconception. There's a lot of people that, oh, we build your one-time flows for $2,000, $3,000, whatever it is. And like they never actually optimize any of this stuff, right? So I'm going to break down what I call the retention revenue engine. It has 4 layers, and each one of these builds on the last layer. Now, layer 1 is going to be your automated flows. This is where we can create automations based on the customer lifecycle and the different points that they come through in relation to your brand, right? So your welcome flow, abandonment flows, post-purchase, subscription, upsell, ascension flows, cross-sell flows, things like this. The second layer is going to be your campaigns, your campaign strategy. This is where we are building the relationship weekly. This is where we show up consistently, and not from a discounts and promo perspective, but we are showing up education first, value first, getting people interacting with our brand, bringing them into our community, explaining why our products actually enhance their life, explaining why they need to stick to the use of these products long term so they can actually get the results, right? That's how you build product adoption. And guess what happens when people adopt products? They use products, they run out of them, and then guess what they do? They come back and they buy again if you've done your job correctly on the retention side. The third channel is going to be SMS. This, for many brands, is the highest ROI channel in e-commerce. Most brands, unfortunately, ignore it, but it's a huge channel. And while emails essentially build off of long-term campaigns and strategies and things like this, SMS is really good at driving last-minute urgency and getting people to come back and buy at any moment's notice. And then the last but not least, because this is actually the top of the funnel, is going to be your list growth when it comes to retention. This is where we are feeding this giant engine, this giant beast that we have built with high intent subscribers. Now, it's not just slap a 10% off discount and hope that people sign up. This is where continuous optimization, offer testing, 10% off versus an AOV pegged dollar off value versus a mystery offer versus some sort of freebie or free gift or lead gen magnet for people who want to stay away from discounting or giving away promos. And maybe we want to nurture people based on high value information that is useful to them, that actually gets them to trade their email address for that thing that we're offering, essentially. So when we jump in a little bit more into detail, let's talk a little bit more about the automated flows in depth, right? Because this is where the revenue goes on autopilot, as a lot of retention marketers like to play it off. Now, for most brands, the core flow is going to be the welcome flow, abandoned cart, abandoned browse, and your post-purchase. When we start to get a little bit larger, have more traffic coming through our funnel, have more ad spend on the top, we have more lifecycle touch points with our brand. This is where we start to layer in some higher end or sort what we call satellite flows. So again, win-back flows, sunset flows. You have subscription ascension flows, one-time buyers, converting them into subscribers so we can build in that MRR, build in that lifetime value. but ultimately that's what the flows are. It's something you set up and then they sort of run forever. And the best optimizations come from offer testing, high value touch points. So welcome flow email number one, the first two touch points in the brand abandonment series. We know that these are the touch points that generally have the most amount of conversions, take rates coming through them. So those are the touch points that we want to continuously split test every single month. Now, when it comes to campaigns, this is where we show up consistently and really start to build a relationship with our customers. How do we do that? There's generally 3 buckets of campaign topics that we generally syndicate across, and we want to send 2 to 4 emails per week at a very minimum. For some bigger, larger brands, we usually send 8 emails, 12 emails, 16 emails. Some brands, we send an email a day, and it really just depends on how we're segmenting and a lot of other factors. But to keep this simple, we want to basically split this up across 3 different buckets. First, we have the trust bucket. This is education, product tips, how-tos, industry insights that make you the trusted expert and establish that authority in the space so people trust you and convert into your products. The second is going to be loyalty. This is building that brand story, right? So founders notes, behind the scenes moments, how we made our product, your mission. These are the things that build trust deeply, give people a behind the scenes into your operation, and make them feel like they are actually part of what you're building. Then we have revenue-driven campaigns, which is going to be more promotions, sales, new launches, exclusive subscriber-only offers that drive immediate revenue. This is where we build a lot of the revenue on the month-to-month, but as a general sense, we really like to incorporate the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, which is 80 or even 75% of all campaigns that we send are specifically going into education and brand story and building value. And then the other 20 to 25% are actually going into promotions and discounts. And the very biggest reason why we do this is because we don't want to condition our customers to always expect discounts and sales, because at the end of the day, that's going to make you a discount brand. It's going to reduce the urgency to actually get people to convert because there's always something happening. And ultimately, you're training your discounts to expect training your customers to expect some sort of discount or sale that ultimately is always happening, right? Now, here is a quick look at the 3 types of emails in the wild. And, one thing is saying, oh, education and trust building and promotions, but what does that look like in practice? Well, here you have several emails across different brands that we manage, and these are brands that do $2 million a year to brands that do $50 million a year. And regardless of the brand, regardless of the vertical, regardless of the industry, we can still create buckets of content around these 3 specific principles. And that's how we are able to build a cohesive email campaign strategy that gets people coming back for more and opening the emails every single week. Let's talk about SMS really quick, because this is the channel that most brands ignore, and it's such a huge overlooked channel. On average, we get a 98% open rate across SMSs. The ROI per dollar on SMS is significantly higher than email, about a 50x, right? Now, the best use cases for SMS are going to be number 1, flash sales and limited time offers, because we have a much shorter amount of text that we can fit into these SMSs without creeping up costs. And we want to make sure that these are hitting people at the right time. We don't send emails and SMSs at the right time because we want to capture more footprint in people's daily attention span. So if we send an email, let's say at 10 a.m. Eastern, then we want to send the SMS maybe in the afternoon, 1, 2 p.m. after lunch, so that we can capture more attention in people's day. That's a big tip. Shipping and delivery alerts are huge for this, making them more transactional. And of course, time-sensitive launches are huge. We generally recommend sending 2 to 4 SMSs per month as a general guideline. It's not a hard rule. There are some brands that have a higher intent with SMS. We might send 8 SMSs per month. Some brands do even more. And it really just comes down to a lot of factors, including segmentation and things like this. Now, list growth. This is where we feed the engine, right? Because we can build out the best flows, the best campaigns, but if we're not feeding new subscribers into this engine on the top end, then at the end of the day, we are a stagnating brand and a retention program that is decaying, right? Because we have more unsubscribers than subscribers, right? So that's a big issue. So how do we make sure that we're always feeding this engine? Having a right pop-up that converts 5 to 15% of your traffic. The standard is 2 to 3%, but for high growth brands, you want to aim upwards of 5%. There are many different ways to do this. You can do a 10% off. You can do a dollar off. You can do, like I mentioned earlier, a mystery offer. You can layer in lead gen things that are valuable to your target market. Testing is what decides what gets the highest success rate. Do not listen to anybody out there that says, this is the best mechanism, 25% with a gift. You have to test. It's unique to every single brand. And what might work for some brand that is getting them a 12% opt-in rate ends up getting 4% for your brand and vice versa. So testing is the way that this works. And you can even layer in ZPD, which is zero party data segmentation, which is just a fancy way of saying, for example, what products are you most interested in? If you have different product lines like THC, CBD, kratom, kava, mushroom, like this particular client we work with, then we can segment those people in the automations, we can segment those people in the campaigns, and we can personalize these emails so that it hits better, resonates more, and ultimately gets them converting at a higher rate. And of course, you can see some brands do 18% opt-in, 8% opt-in, 6% opt-in. It really just depends on your brand and ultimately how we structure the offer. Now, what does it look like when you are running retention at a high level and implementing all these different things and they come together to build a really solid attribution? This is what it looks like. This is a brand that does about $18 million a year. We have helped them scale from around $200K a month, so about a $3 million brand in the last 16 months. We've helped them scale to where they're at right now. We are generating about 40% of email and SMS attribution, as you can see right here on the right. And this is basically broken down into several key elements of the retention program. Of course, you have flows, which have driven 347K, about 65% of the total attributed revenue. We have campaigns that have driven 187K, or 35% of the attributed revenue. And then you have the SMS program, which is driving about 72K a month, about 13% of the total attributed revenue. That is almost 40% of total store revenue with zero additional ad spend. And that's the point. We're capturing people, we're nurturing them properly in our life cycle behavior flows, and ultimately we're getting them to come back with our campaigns and building a really solid community. So at the end of the day, if I could leave you with one walk away, is that retention compounds and ads don't. Paid ads is linear. You spend a certain amount, you get clicks, and then you have to keep paying again to get people to come back. There's no equity accumulated. There's no relationship being built on the back end for your ecom brand. And so the costs are rising every single year. And ultimately, the moment that you stop spending, everything stops too. You're on a treadmill and the speed only goes up. Imagine that every time that you're thinking about spending more money on ads, which again is not a bad thing. It's good that we have scale and acquisition expenses going up. But ultimately, what you need to have is a really solid retention marketing on the bottom of funnel, because this is exponential. The list grows, you optimize your flows, you're split testing things, you're sending better campaigns, you're segmenting better, your lifetime value rises on the back end. You don't have to repay to reacquire the customers you already paid for on the front end, and ultimately revenue compounds, right? Each layer in the retention program makes the next more powerful. And it gets cheaper and more effective over time, which is the opposite. It's the adverse effect of ads. So this is the definition of a brand that cannot be disrupted by an iOS update, because you own that list. We're not depending on Facebook or TikTok or any other platform, okay? So if you were to start this week, just some quick actionables. What I would recommend, depending, of course, on your bandwidth, the amount of resources that you have, your team availability, but the first thing you need to do if you don't have this is you need to set up your core flows, right? You got to have a good welcome flow, introduce people to your brand, walk them through your products, the science behind it, how it actually works, load up more social proof, guide them to the right products so you can get them to convert more easier and just remove all the friction. You want to have your abandonment flows, of course, and you want to have a post-purchase flow or win back that actually gets people coming back over and over again. You want to commit to at least 2 emails per week. Now, again, these are sort of evergreen rules. Take them with a grain of salt. Like I said, it really just depends on brand to brand, but at a bare minimum, you want to do around 1 to 2 emails per week. And ultimately, one of the best things that we're seeing right now is using a quiz pop-up. So Octane AI is a really good partner of ours. You can build quizzes that have different conditional logic to guide people to the specific products. So I'll give you an example. For a hair loss brand that we have, we all know that there are different types of hair loss. We generally batch it into 4 different types of hair loss. You have clinical hair loss, you have hormonal hair loss, you have regular, like maybe hygiene hair loss. I'm just giving you some examples. Each hair loss patient has a different objective. Each one has a different cause for the hair loss. So we have them take a quiz that guides them to the right product based on the hair loss that they have, and we can actually educate them along the way. So once they finish the quiz, if they don't convert right then and there, we can create specific abandoned quiz flows which actually hit the specific personalization and the pain points that they have and the objections they might have depending on the hair loss that they have and are experiencing. So that's just a little glimpse of how far you can take this, but we're seeing quiz pop-ups convert very well and have really good opt-in rates as well. Now, here's the pitch. If you want to build an engine that doesn't cost $223 per customer, that independentizes you from Facebook and TikTok and all these other platforms for paid ads that are rising in cost and becoming more expensive and less profitable year over year, and you want to build a retention system that compounds over time and actually helps your brand grow, then you can reach out. I'm going to do a free retention audit if you qualify for it. We take a look at your revenue gaps, see where you have these leaks, what you could be doing better, what you're not doing at all, and ultimately create a custom strategy that is tailored to your brand, your audience, and your goals. And the end goal here is to give you at the very least a 20% increase in what you're currently doing. Most brands see more, but of course nothing is guaranteed. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.